hold on the entertainment industry. Given this company's reach, influence, and sheer volume of beloved IPs, I think it's safe to make the following statement. Disney doesn't need to try anymore. Not saying that they've stopped trying, they've released some incredible works of art throughout the 2010s with a ton of effort put into them. But all I'm saying is, they don't need to put effort in anymore in order to succeed. The Walt Disney Company is too big to fail. They can release uninspired remake after uninspired remake, mediocre sequel after mediocre sequel, and it doesn't matter. People will eat it up because their emotional connection to the Walt Disney brand is too strong. Remember in my Megamind video when I said Illumination stopped trying after the first Despicable Me because they realized they would make money either way? Well, that's the threshold Disney finds themselves on now, but to an even larger degree. Unless audiences get real sick of unoriginality real soon, there is no longer a need to experiment or come up with inventive, brilliant ideas in order to succeed as a company. And this past decade has been the culmination of that fact. Star Wars is loaded with nostalgia bait, and its attempts to be original have mostly backfired. Pixar has been churning out sequel after sequel that, more often than not, lack the imagination and ingenuity that made the originals such a success. And of course, the live-action remakes that suck all the personality out of the original film and replace them with pandering, hollow, pseudo-wokeness.
Teaching another girl to read isn't one enough.
You know, Amy, anytime someone calls attention to the breaking of gender roles, it ultimately undermines the concept of gender equality by implying that this is an exception and not the status quo.
What does he mean by that?
It's not all bad news, though. The MCU has been pretty good overall. Every once in a while, Pixar remembers how to make something really exceptional. And honestly, the most consistent voice throughout this decade of unoriginality and fan service and pandering has been, who else? Walt Disney Animation Studios. After an abysmal decade during the 2000s, they've kind of taken Pixar's crown as the premier animation studio of the 2010s. Pixar has made more money, but Disney Animation has left more of an impact, I feel. Their movies throughout the 2010s have mostly all had heart, creativity, wit, energy, and above all, effort put in. Even the movies I don't like as much, like the Frozen films and Big Hero 6, aren't lazy in the slightest. They're well put together and have a ton of artistic merit. Some artistic merit. And on the opposite end, movies like Moana and Tangled have become some of my all-time favorites. These movies are not perfect, but they're all refreshingly original and special in their own ways. I always thought of this decade as a new Disney renaissance of sorts. But it didn't last, because fresh off the heels of one of their greatest movies ever, Moana, Disney released one of the movies in their entire catalog, and that's kinda saying a lot. Ralph Breaks the Internet is emblematic of every problem modern Disney has. It's uninspired, it's pandering, it's a sequel to a movie that didn't warrant a continuation. It even has a dash of mishandled pseudo-wokeness. Oh, by gosh, by golly, you did it, Disney. You made the perfect storm of awfulness. Granted, there are at least 3 Pixar movies this decade that are worse, but Ralph Breaks the Internet, more than any of these movies, screams, we don't have to try anymore. We have our brands, we have those characters you liked in the first movie, we have an actual good message buried underneath the abysmal ham-fisted execution. We'll take that Oscar now, thank you very much. We earned it for sure. Oy vey. This is gonna be a tough one to get through. But I guess I should start by being nice to the movie, since it's not the worst thing ever. Hell, it's only the 4th worst animated movie released under the Disney umbrella this decade. Oh wait, sorry, the 5th worst animated movie. So let's get into the stuff I actually really like. Don't worry, there's not much. I think the most obvious thing that is not terrible about this movie would be the Disney princess stuff. Their first scene doesn't feel like awful product placement like the stuff right before it. It feels like a genuinely funny, kinda important plot development. Since Vanellope subverted the typical princess role at the end of the first movie, seeing them take that meta commentary one step further in the sequel is actually a smart idea. She teaches them the power of comfy clothing with legit clever references on them, and in turn, they teach her the power of following your dream heart song and whatnot. It's really funny to see an unconventional princess like Vanellope try and come up with an I Want song of her own, and miserably fail. at first. But yeah, I love the princess stuff in this. I like how well the 2D designs translate into 3D. I like that 3PO is their butler, because that just kind of fits right in perfectly. I like Ariel's passionate ballad about shirts. I like that Elsa isn't given more screen time than the others. I like how this movie hates Merida as much as I do. And that payoff at the end with all the princesses using their abilities to save Ralph is so damn good. It's super creative. Hearing instrumental versions of each princess's theme is an excellent touch. And it was neat to see a semi-obscure character like Prince Naveen in frog form. That subverted my expectations. Speaking of which, Vanellope's song honestly gives me so much joy. It works really well as a subversion of the classic Disney I Want power ballad formula, and it's a pretty good song once you separate it from how terribly written her motivations are. Reminds me of another song. A Place Called Slaughter Race is filled with so much imagination and whimsy, to the point where I genuinely wonder if the people who worked on it are the same people who made the rest of this pile of garbage. Okay, sorry, positives. I'm sure there's more positives. The Ralph monster is really well animated and absolutely abominable. Great work, animation team. The 2 post-credit scenes are legendary. I can't believe Disney actually animated a Rickroll. Like, it's an older meme, but it checks out. Rickrolling is legendary in the vast history of the internet, and it's not really an example of Disney's executives being behind the times. It's a legit good tribute. Ralph as Bob Ross was inspired, and this is what I was referring to in my first review. The one viral video Ralph made that was good. It was this one. How did you guys not... Am I just old and you youngins had no idea who Ralph was supposed to be here? Well, like, please explain. I guess Spamley is an okay character? I don't know. The part where he tries to catch Ralph was the only time I laughed outside of the princess stuff in the song. It was cute when Ralph and Vanellope didn't understand how auctions worked. I liked how Nosemore's eyes are done with 2D animation. I don't know. I'm really trying here, guys. Oh, wait, this line. This line is great.
The internet is not nearly as impressive as how Sonic described it.
I like when Ralph commits homicide on this lady's internet connection. And yeah, that's about it. This movie isn't quite the same slog as Brave or The Good Dinosaur, but in a lot of ways, it's more insulting than either of those movies, since it takes likable, pre-established characters and really mangles both of them in such a disappointing fashion. So while this film has good elements, and while I'd sooner sit through it than Pixar's Unholy Trilogy, I hate it much more than those films simply on account of what it represents. This film, much like the title implies, is broken. From its premise, to its characters, to its messages. And hey, let's talk about that middle thing, shall
No. I just put chips in this meat.
Shall we? So I like the first Wreck-It Ralph movie quite a bit. Maybe not as much as I did when I was younger, and certainly not as much as the animated musicals, but I still think it's a really strong film. And before any of you smart Alecs trying to accuse me of having a musical bias, I'll have you know that Lilo and Stitch is a cinematic masterpiece and one of my favorite Disney movies, and that's not even a musical. So there. Got him. Anyway, yeah, Wreck-It Ralph is really good, like I said.
Thanks, Satan.
I think it has an incredibly
Satan.
captivating setting and a really strong premise. It has a lot of great video game references, from the in-your-face to the subtle ones. King Candy is a legit fantastic villain. Ralph and Vanellope's bond is really strong, and their inevitable big fight scene is actually very well implemented into the story, and legitimately pretty heartbreaking. And they didn't have to destroy the characters' personalities in order to make it happen. And yeah, I don't know, man, that climax and ending both at night, this sounds like a minor point, but it's not, since this is what causes the wheel to break, the game to get unplugged, and the thousands of candy people to become homeless. All because these two acted alarmingly selfishly and didn't consider the consequences of their actions. I kinda thought after the first movie, when Ralph's game ran the risk of getting unplugged once he went turbo, that he would have learned a lesson about Ralph is insecure. He's paranoid about the idea that he and Vanellope are arguing over something, and he needs to resolve this non-argument right now. And this is honestly the biggest problem with the film. It treats Ralph like a blithering man-baby when that really wasn't who he was at all in the first film. He was more of an everyman, a down-on-his-luck guy who was tired of nobody appreciating him. His relationship to Vanellope gave off more of a father-daughter or lame uncle vibe, where there's definitely a strong connection there, but it's more of a mentorship sort of thing. I know video game characters don't age, but Ralph is programmed as this older dude, and Vanellope is programmed as like a 10-year-old girl. It would be really weird if Ralph was this ultra clingy best friend who acts defensive and angry whenever this 10-year-old girl wants to hang out with someone else. Oh wait! Ralph and Vanellope's relationship in this movie is just so weird. As an adult, you kind of bring yourself down a few levels to interact with kids, which is what I assumed was happening in the first movie. But I guess Ralph really just has the mental capacity of a 5-year-old, while Vanellope is discovering her passions like someone in their early 20s would. It's a weird juxtaposition. If Ralph acted like more of an overprotective father and less of a creepy, needy, obsessive best friend, that would have worked a lot better. This is preposterous. Anyway, back to Ralph being an asshole. He never apologizes for getting Sugar Rush unplugged, rendering thousands of people homeless. And then he acts like this is some amazing thing for Vanellope. Now they can just hang out all the time and do nothing, which is exactly what she wants. Except not. If Ralph had just employed basic listening skills, he could be trying to console her for losing her home, but instead his head is so far up his own ass that he expresses how excited he is that Vanellope can now live out his ideal life of doing nothing all day. Now, isn't the whole point of the movie Ralph learning that this way of thinking is wrong, you may ask? Yeah, but I feel like Ralph in the first movie wasn't this emotionally dim or selfish. I don't think this is a lesson he needed to learn. Or if he did need to, he shouldn't have acted this insecure about it. But at every turn, he expresses how much he doesn't trust Vanellope's cool new friend Shank, or how sad he's gonna be to spend a couple hours apart from his best friend, who he hasn't been separated from in 6 years. Except every single day when they go to work in their own separate games, but God forbid she carries a pop-up ad around by herself for 2 hours. All of it just lacks subtlety, and I think the giant Ralph monster is a tremendous example of how unsubtle and creepy the message is when you apply it to these characters. Sorry that I don't like the image of a grown man slobbering over his friendship with a little girl. Wish I could tell you that I don't find that weird, cause I do. I buy the connections between characters in Toy Story because they do it with toys that physically look to be the same age. But this is uncomfortable and super on the nose. Like, there's this really awkward line where Ralph basically just states the message of the movie without allowing kids to pick it up themselves.
Wow. From up here, I can see how I do come across as needy and clingy and self-destructive, like Knowsmore said.
I think the fact that the movie ends with Ralph and Vanellope apart is enough to let kids get the message, guys. Subtlety is a blessing. When I was a kid and I watched Ratatouille, I didn't need these chefs to say, "Wow, I don't like the idea of working for an idiot controlled by a rat. That's weird. I quit." I understood what their motivations were without them saying anything. Kids are smarter than you think, as opposed to Ralph, who is dumber than I thought. Because when he sees Vanellope wanting to stay in Slaughter Race, he's so emotionally unintelligent that he just assumes that she's brainwashed. Yeah, that makes sense. After all, her desire to race in a more exciting environment just sprang up out of the blue. She never mentioned this before. Like, seriously, dude, how dense are you? You've known her for 6 years, and you don't understand that this is what she's always wanted? So Ralph, in a final act of character assassination, decides to unleash a deadly virus in the Slaughter Race to make it so boring that Vanellope will want to leave. Now, given Ralph's experience with viruses, you'd think that this would not be something he would want to be doing to this game his best friend is in. What the hell do you know? Of course Ralph would do that. Just trust us. This movie won an Oscar before the Oscars even happened. F you.
Arthur will find some defect
Well, no.
code and spread it all over the game.
All over the
Till
game.
everything becomes
Quote
quote
unquote. Boring.
Like, really? You're telling me he's that much of a brain-dead moron that he goes through with this plan after hearing that?
Are you stupid? Because the only way anyone gets hurt is if you are stupid.
So yeah, something goes wrong and Vanellope's gonna die. And I love how there's 60 seconds to save her, but Ralph wastes time explaining to the audience, I mean Spamly, that she'll die if he doesn't get her out. Like, you can tell Spamly that after you go save her. You don't exactly have time to waste. And then 10 seconds later, Shank literally says the exact same thing, so there literally was no reason to have Ralph say this to the audience. Just one of the many insecurities present in the script. But when you got too many insecurities, they just build and build until your movie becomes this giant, horrifying, stitched together abomination that lays waste to everything in its path. And that's no good. Also, many have mentioned this, but I love how the movie just forgets about the virus. It's still loose on the internet, right? They only got rid of the Ralph clones, but the Ralph and Vanellope just kind of forgot about this little bugger. Whoops. Oh well, at least with how bad Ralph is, there's no way Vanellope can possibly be worse, right?
No!
Right?
Wrong!
Right, actually. Yeah, she's not as bad, but she's still not good. In Vanellope's case, a lot of people seem to take issue with the fact that her story arc entirely contradicts the previous film. She's going turbo, jumping from game to game with no thought of the consequences. The first film constantly tells its characters that they can't go turbo, and that game jumping is the worst thing you can possibly do.
Ralph's gone turbo?
But Vanellope does it in this movie. What in tarnation? That's bad writing. And to that I say, yes. Yes, it is. But not exactly for the reasons most people think. Did you know that people change over time? They get different goals. They have different dreams. They think they know what they want, but what they wanted gets old to them, and they want to find their passion somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with the concept of Vanellope wanting to find a different game to call home. But the problem here is the rules. The first movie drills the idea into your head that going turbo is bad. But not necessarily. Ralph went turbo, and it led to a string of events that saved Vanellope from a life of isolation and depression, all the while destroying the original Turbo once and for all. It was bad for Ralph's game since it appeared to be broken without him there, but that's because he's a crucial character for the game to work. Vanellope says herself that she's one of 16 racers, though it's weird that she says no one would miss her when she clearly makes the game more popular. Still, Sugar Rush functioned for years without her on the roster. It could feasibly function without her. Whenever I go to the arcade with my friends, I'd probably still play Mario Kart even if Waluigi suddenly vanished from the roster one day. It would sting and be really disappointing, and I might cry about it that night before booting up Smash Bros to cheer myself up before being hit with a doubly crushing revelation, but hey, I'd still play the games. If Vanellope wants to follow her passions, good for her. But considering the fact that she's basically doing what the villain did in the last movie, they don't even mention him once, that's kind of jarring. Like, Ralph could tell her there's no way she should go turbo under any circumstances. Vanellope
Chernobyl.
The stone perspective gets challenged by the
No, wait, no, I'm so dummy. I like it has a red lightsaber. Uku.